ATAR. Today I'm going to go through 19 argument analysis red flags that examiners absolutely hate and what you can do to avoid them. I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Launa from LaunaTutors. I got a 97 ATAR and a Rule 44 in English, and I've been tutoring for a real long time now. You can go on my website to see all the student testimonials, LaunaTutors.com. I have study guides, I have sample essays, I have a bunch of free resources as well as a workshop coming up, workshop recording too. But take a look and prepare yourself for the VCE English exam. Anyways, argument analysis is my favorite part of the English exam, and so I'm very excited to do this video and go through the examiner's report. I'm going to be basing this off of the examiner's report from 2024, which has a bunch of data points and insights, which is perfect for you because the study design recently changed. So you actually have like the most updated version of what you should and shouldn't be doing. Also, I have an argument analysis study guide. It's for the 2025 edition. It covers audio visual as well. And it has a sample essay for AA, so it basically has everything you need to do to be able to write a really good argument analysis essay. So go check that out. It's on my website, LaunaTutors.com. Let's start by going through last year's examiner's report, 2024 VCE English examiner's report, specifically section C in strategies that limited responses, which is a polite way of saying we absolutely hate this, don't do this, or examiners will take off marks from you. And right next to it, I hope you can see, is the actual exam from last year, just so I can point out exactly what I'm talking about. Anyways, let's go to the first point that they absolutely hate. Limited focus on context and audience. And what they mean by this is they don't like responses that may have indicated a misreading of the text. This may have manifested itself as a limited understanding of, one, the writer's contention. For example, thinking that the contention was to promote the benefit of lollies and thus also the purpose of the piece. Now, if you've read last year's exam, good job. If you haven't, let me quickly explain what's going on. Essentially, this whole piece is a speech, I believe, at a members meeting of a gym, because they are thinking of partnering with a lolly shop to continue the gym and sustain the gym financially, because they're struggling with finances, and partnering and having the lolly shop there will give them rent money or something, and they'll be able to continue forward. So they obviously want people to vote, yes, we're okay with this partnership, right? But what people have mistakenly done last year is thinking that the contention was to promote the benefit of lollies, because a lot of this is talking about how lollies aren't so bad, you know, guys. Like, for example, long live lollies, popular sweets. There's a clash between our values. The occasional treat or sugar hit can be a joy. We know that fun and laughter are as important to our health as regular exercise. But you see how, like, people might have read that and gone, okay, I guess the piece is about, you know, letting us know lollies aren't that bad for you. Okay, that's one of the arguments, right? That lollies are not actually deadly for you, and so this partnership isn't that contradictory. But it's not the point. The contention would be that a lolly store and a gym partnering up may seem contradictory, but it can actually be complementary in providing a balanced lifestyle, right? And, you know, gyms are all about balance. Gyms are all about, I guess, even like mindset of balance and, you know, being healthy for yourself. The occasional treat won't hurt. But that's the contention. It's not lollies are fine, right? The contention is that. And here's a mini lesson for you. A contention is different from a purpose. A contention is an opinion or thought of some sorts, right? And the thought is that this isn't contradictory. These philosophies actually go together. And that supports the purpose, which is for the members listening to this speech to vote, yes, we're okay with this partnership going forward, instead of, no, why would a lolly store be in a gym? Like, that is completely contradictory. Keep in mind that those two things are different. But anyways, how you can avoid getting the wrong contention, first of all, would be to read the background information box and take a look at what's going on. This funding has been removed and money will now go to other council projects. They need council funding, or they need more money. So they've found a way to keep facilities operating, which is to work with the lollies, right? And so that already gives you enough context to think, okay, this isn't just about are lollies good or bad, right? That's the context that you walk in with. And so you're thinking, what does the gym want me to think? That's contention. Purpose is quite literally just they want members to vote yes or no, right? They want them to vote yes. Now, let's go into the context. Not recognizing the consequences of failure to secure council subsidies, quite similar to what I said before. You can find this in the background information box. It wasn't just about, oh, like lollies aren't bad or gyms and lolly shops should be able to work together. It's they're focusing on, a very real thing of potential financial ruin or potentially not being able to continue forward. Another thing about argument analysis is that you need to read between the lines. Sometimes things are not explicitly said, although I do think everything here is quite explicitly said. And you need to be able to comprehend, right? It's kind of like watching an advertisement. Is this advertisement telling me that Kit Kats are amazing for relaxation and really good for my health? Or is it ultimately something a marketing agency came up with to sell me Kit Kats and make me want to buy a Kit Kat, right? My takeaway from the ad isn't necessarily going to be Kit Kats are actually really good for mental health. It's probably Kit Kat wants me to buy a Kit Kat, or Kit Kat wants to increase its, I don't know, stock prices, something like that. But you need to be able to read between the lines. Not everything given to you is necessarily what they mean. And so even at the arguments here, they're like, oh, like we're doing this for you. Like, we don't want to like, shut the gym down and like let you go into less affordable, less accessible gyms. Like obviously they don't want to get shut down, but the way they're positioning it is also, oh, it's for your benefit, when ultimately it's for their benefit. They want to keep running, right? But you need to develop the ability to read between the lines and ask yourself, what does this author want me to, what ultimately does the author want? Full stop. Next, the audience. Believing the audience was a committee or the general public. Again, I think this is misreading. And I think y'all just need to not misread by underlining or highlighting things and being very crystal clear on that. But the audience, you can always find it in the background information box. And over here, it's the members of the gym to vote on a proposal, right? So the members of the gym. One thing that's going to get you immediately losing marks is saying the general public or Australians or the Australian general public. Never, ever, 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 ever say that. You will always be wrong. You'll always be wrong. Always just look in the background information box. Like, don't even. Okay. Like if you didn't have a background information box, I would ask you to look at the news outlet for political leanings or like socioeconomic demographics targeting. But for VCE English, it's always in the background information box. But yeah, the foundational misunderstanding made it very difficult to successfully complete the task. If you get these things wrong, you can't really analyze, because analysis is broken into authorial intent and intended effect. The authorial intent is ultimately the writer and why they do certain things. So looking at the writer's contention plus context. And the intended effect is how is this intended to impact the audience? And if you get that wrong, you also can't accurately position them. You also can't accurately, I guess, describe what's happening in that area, because you would just say, oh, the general public would probably like this or not like this. When we're not talking about the general public, we're talking about a very specific group of people, gym goers at this specific gym. Okay, simplifying the text or tasks. Responses may have, and remember they don't like this, not address the complexity of the argument. This may have manifested itself as an overlaying a simple strategy to explain the argument. For example, it begins, it ends, and the visual conveys ideas by ... I think this is mostly referring to topic sentences. Now, I have something controversial to say. If you don't know how to write a topic sentence, I think this is okay. Examiners don't like it. But if you really struggle with topic sentences, I don't think going by a chronological order is the end of the world. However, what they want is a bit more strategy. And I go through this in my argument analysis study guide. No, but they also do want a bit of strategy involved. So they don't just want the argument begins, right? They might want to hear something like the speaker begins the argument with an attempt to establish rapport, or, with a tonal shift for blah, 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 blah. But they don't just want a simple beginning and ends, or, continues. Ask yourself, what is it like in the beginning if you are going to go chronological order, right? What are the emotions that they're trying to pinpoint in the beginning? What foundations are they trying to lay in the beginning? So over here, thank you for attending before we blah, blah, blah. The argument begins with, laying foundations and going through like all the emotions surrounding the gym and the history, maybe like, I don't know, historical appeal. And then it kind of shifts into talking about larger gyms and, how maybe they're a bit inaccessible. They're a little bit, not down to earth or whatever. But see how that shifts into, I guess not criticizing, but a little bit of criticizing other gyms. Like we're not like other gyms. What the examiners want to see is a little bit of an acknowledgement of how the arguments or how the text progresses, you know? It progresses by developing an emotional connection, and then it kind of continues into, you know, other gyms aren't really like us. Like we get you, like they don't get us. And then it shifts into we need money. You see how that's less simplistic than this? It's similar. It's similar because you're still acknowledging the arguments chronologically, but they just want a little bit more acknowledgement of what is happening in the text rather than beginning, middle, end, right? And also this one, I would just say don't dedicate a whole paragraph to visuals. You treat visuals like language devices. They are there to support your topic sentences. So this will probably support a paragraph where you talk about the speaker introducing Long Live Lolly's store, and you would use this as like a piece of evidence to supplement, you know, whatever. Okay, identified the idea presented, but not commented on the strategic sequencing of the idea or explain the way that this connected to the writer's purpose. Again, what I said before, why are the ideas paced a certain way? Right? Why did they start off with building emotional rapport before derogating an opponent? Before, you know, appealing to emotion and like, we're gonna lose money, like, we're not gonna be able to operate and like serve you guys. And then after all of that, bringing up the lollies, right? They want to put you through like a little emotional roller coaster before like, we actually have a solution. But I guess like, that's what I mean by if you do go by chronologically, which I still like, I like chronological order, right? You want to add a little bit more by acknowledging what's happening, not just the literal argument that's happening in the beginning, but also emotionally what they're trying to do to the audience or like where they want the audience to be. I don't know if you know about like stages of argument, but like usually the first stage of argument is rapport building, which is building a positive relationship. The second one is building credibility, so like a sense of trust. You can trust what I say, right? What I say is verified. What I say is like supported by evidence and facts. And the next is like a rebuttal. So rebutting any potential concerns you've had. And finally, the call to action. Most things kind of follow that loosely, but that's like a way you can think about the progression of your arguments. Obviously, they don't have to follow that specific order, but just try to think about the strategic sequencing. And I know the word strategic can throw you off, but I would just take a step back, ignore the word strategic, and ask yourself, why does the author try to make me feel this way at this point in the text? And then why do they try to make me feel this way at that point in the paragraph, right? As it progresses. Why does it progress that way? Also, don't use the word make in your essay. I know I just said it. Please don't use that word. You cannot make anyone do anything. Just say attempts to blah, 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 or encourages or discourages. And simply summarize the argument. Oh my gosh. Another massive argument analysis mistake that I see students make all the time because they don't know how to analyze. Do not simply summarize what's going on, because analysis is about providing new insights, right? Why does the author do this and how is this meant to position the audience? Those are the two main questions that argument analysis revolves around. But if you just go, what is the text about? That's the introduction. That's not your body paragraphs, right? The introduction wants to know what's the context, what's the contention, what's the purpose, what's the audience, what's the form. Everything else, they want you to dive a bit deeper and ask yourself, how does the author attempt to persuade the audience? With the visuals, with the language devices, with the features, with the tone, of the appeals, like what? So don't just summarize the argument, bring something new to the table. Description of language, even with examples. Ooh. Responses may have demonstrated a limited understanding of analytical thinking process as one requiring description only. For example, the first speaker welcomed the audience and then she acknowledged the difficult situation by describing their shared history. This has no analysis in it. I would argue this is like, if you made this a bit shorter or like wrote it a certain way, it's an okay topic sentence, but this is not a good piece of analysis because it doesn't tell me anything new. Why do they share? Why does the gym share their difficult situation? Why focus on shared history? What is the purpose of doing that, right? Instead of welcoming the audience, actually, you know what, ignore that. But this doesn't really tell me anything about why the author does this and how this is meant to position the audience. How does it make the audience feel? Just because it's obvious what the author is trying to do doesn't mean that the examiner thinks it's obvious, right? When I read this, I'm like, obviously you're trying to guilt trip me a little bit. You want me to be like, oh yeah, I remember the good times, I remember our shared history or whatever. But that's kind of what analysis is. You want to explain that I'm thinking that way when I'm hearing this speech. You want to tell me a little bit about, the audience may blah, 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 blah in their heads, right? The examiner wants to see that even though when you write it like this, it seems really obvious. But anyways, saying it as an analyze. Okay, an incomplete understanding of the analytical thinking process by leaving out key elements. For example, the writer presents the listener with the options facing them in order to persuade them. Oh my gosh. No, this doesn't tell me, it's not specific. What options? What are they facing? Persuade them into what? In this situation, it's voting, and the options are either yes candy store or no candy store and no gym. This is leaving out key elements, and this is also not specific enough. I could copy and paste this into any argument analysis essay, and it would function the same, right? You want it to be specific enough where it is obviously for this text. Generic analysis, for example, inclusive language such as we and are used by the speaker to encourage the group to feel a sense of belonging. Similar solution to this. I personally don't think there's an issue with using inclusive language, but it is overused, and I would pair it with another technique, or I would pair it with something else going on. Like, for example, using inclusive language while banging on about shared history or while doing something else, like it kind of enhances it. And I think another thing that Vika wants to see more is like interplay. So interplay of language, visuals, and argument. And so I think they want to see like a combination of like features, techniques working in conjunction with each other to do something. But anyways, encourage the group to feel a sense of belonging and persuade them. I swear that is like ripped off from my language device document. Not saying that to be her, but rather some students who read it. And to that I say, guys, the language device doc, I swear by it. However, you can't copy and paste it. It needs to be specific analysis. Who is the group, right? Feel a sense of belonging. Belonging to what? Persuade them to do what? Like, it's not specific enough. And generic analysis is terrible because it can be used in any essay, and it can, like, it's technically true, right? Every single language device is used to encourage the group to persuade them to do something. So what you want to do is actually look at what's going on and reference things. Like in the first paragraph, when they're talking about shared history, this is further enhanced by inclusive language. And the speaker encourages the members to, I don't know, remind themselves of the shared values of the gym or something like that. But you see how that's more specific, even though that wasn't like a crazy jump from this, it still sounds so much better because I'm being really specific to the actual text at hand. Exaggerated claims about the power of language. Okay, yeah. Also another pet peeve of mine, not that I hate it, it's that you're gonna lose marks immediately if you do this. Forces the listeners to believe the speaker. You can't force anyone to do anything. You can't make anyone do anything. You can't convince the audience to do anything. You can only attempt, you can only encourage, you can make suggestion, you can intend for the audience to feel a certain way, but you can't make them do anything. So just be a little bit careful about your language there. Like, obviously we want to force the audience to believe the speaker, but audiences all have different opinions. They might listen to this speech and go, this is so dumb. Like, this is, how dare you, right? And so we didn't force that listener to believe the speaker. We attempted to make them think a certain way. We encouraged them to think a certain way, but we can't make them actually hold a particular opinion. Only use a limited range of language features, such as only used a limited range of language features, such as inclusive language, the use of exclamation marks, and a welcoming tone. For this, I would recommend my language devices doc. It's like 19 language devices, and also my language device video. 19 language devices. There are interesting ones like hypotheticals and like comparisons. I would just educate myself on more language features and add it to my repertoire. You're more than likely going to encounter a lot because in argument analysis, what they like to do is write pieces that are full of potential language features that you can reference, right? So you just need to be better at identifying them. Even if you read like past paper examples, just get out a highlighter and get out a pencil and start, identifying the ones you know. Even better yet, if you can't think of a name, just highlight it anyways and go into ChatGPT and be like, what is this language device? Sometimes it's not even a language device, it's just like something, right? But if you can identify this is trying to make me feel something, ask yourself, what is this trying to make me feel? what is the point of the author saying this, right? But yeah, don't just stick to the basic ones, even though I love inclusive language. I love inclusive language, but what about their twin exclusive language? It does the same thing, but it's excluding a certain other group of people to make us feel like we're closer together, you know? Watch my language device video for a deeper analysis of that. You know why like football fans love going to footy with each other? It's because they can be with their own team and be like, "Oh, we're the best team," and then look at the other team playing and be like, "They suck," right? But when you say they suck, you know, you kind of feel a little bit closer to your team because you're like, we're not them, we're better than them, right? And so it kind of accomplishes the same thing as inclusive language, funnily enough. But anyways, let's keep going. Self-evident conclusions. For example, the speaker uses comparison to compare, or the speaker uses inclusive language to include. I think this one is pretty self-evident. Don't say that. The speaker uses comparison to highlight a difference of and then talk about whatever difference it is, or you know, emphasize whatever message you're trying to send. The speaker uses inclusive language to create a sense of shared identity or shared brand or shared values in the gym or whatever shared goal. Don't say stuff like this because this is so no. Like you're reading this and you're like, yeah, don't write that. You know, this is so obvious. And I feel like though, you might write this when you're panicking in the exam and you just need to kind of calm down and take a breath and be like, this is dumb. I'm going to cross it out. Okay. Only describing the visual. A response may have only focused on the written aspect of the visual. For example, only discuss the slogans. Okay, so text is definitely a part of a visual, but you never only focus on the text. It's a visual, and everything else in your argument analysis is text. So obviously the slogan is impactful. I think in this case especially should always acknowledge the slogan. However, you can't only focus on the written part of a visual. You need to focus on the visual elements of a visual. Okay, describe the visual only. For example, visual one shows two lollies walking arm in arm. The lollies are happy. You need to analyze it, and you also do need to take into consideration the text. I think earlier on it says something about how you need to acknowledge the most pertinent parts of the visual. And so the two most pertinent parts would be quite literally the slogan and the visual. And it would be a mistake to ignore either of them. But I think this also means you actually need to analyze it instead of just describing it. Why is it showing two lollies walking arm in arm? Why are the lollies happy? How is that supposed to enhance my argument? What is the peace sign? What's the point of the peace sign, right? You want to actually analyze that and say maybe it symbolizes the gym represented by the heart and the candy bar representing the candy store. And you know, the potential complementary nature of it. The fact that it can coexist, right? And I guess that would be even more reinforced by the peace sign. It can coexist. And then the text, focus on the good, is quite literally telling you or the audience to focus on the good of this partnership. Indicated an incomplete understanding of the analytical thinking process by leaving out key elements. For example, the peace sign made by the heart-shaped lolly convinces the listener that their values align and thus persuades them. This is really generic, like our values align, this persuades me. What values, right? You need to describe what values and then persuades them to do what. A lot of the time with argument analysis, when I read essays, I'm like, you're just not specific enough. But this also means you need to be more specific. And if you're mentioning the peace sign, it needs to be in the context of the piece, right? Like what I said before, the peace sign might indicate something about how the two stores can coexist, which is often a thing associated with the peace symbol. Spent half their essay analyzing the visual. While the analysis might be sound, this reduces the student's opportunity to demonstrate any other skills. Again, these should be treated like language devices. Chop them up into bits, like, and ask yourself, like, is this supported a little bit by this part of the visual? Is this supported by this part of the visual? Is this enhancing a certain argument at this point of the text, right? You don't just dedicate paragraphs to analyzing the visuals. They're not as important as the actual text going on, right? They're there to supplement the text. And so your job is to use them as supplementing your topic sentences or whatever part of the argument you're up to talking about and analyzing and unpacking, right? They're supplementary, but it's not like the main point of your analysis. And that brings us to the next issue, which is omitting to reference any of the visuals. You will It's like a Goldilocks situation. If you don't reference the visuals, losing marks. If you reference it too much, losing marks. If you only reference the written part, losing marks. If you only reference the visual, like little, I don't know, drawings or pictures, you lose marks. Right? You need to kind of find a little balance. I think go by the principle of whatever is most important in this piece, the text and the little symbols, right? And in terms of balancing how much visual you want to put in, again, what I said before, treat it like any other language feature, treat it like evidence that supplements what you're talking about. Treat it as supplementary to your essay rather than the focal point of your essay. But never ever forget the visual. Never do that because even if you write like the most earth-shatteringly beautiful argument analysis essay, if you don't talk about the visuals, you're not getting a 10. You're not getting a 10. Ignoring the links between the text's elements. A response may have analyzed the elements of the text without exploring the interplay with the text's other elements. I would say you should weave this into, like, you should weave the visual into a part of the speech that is best supported by the visual, right? When they start talking about the partnership, think about, maybe not just even the element of visual and text, but also the element of like stages of argument, like rapport. How does rapport tie into certain language devices here? How does tone and tonal shifts tie into the change or the introduction of the proposal, right? Ask yourself how, I guess, more than one feature or more than one element can work together to enhance the speech. And I feel like examiners will absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. You don't need to go crazy. Just ask yourself what things work in conjunction with each other here. A very obvious one is like visual and, something else going on here. Like focus on the good quite literally is the purpose of the essay. I mean, focus on the good is quite literally the purpose of the speech. So how does that connect to this, right? It's very obvious in the way it connects. It visually reinforces this message that is the underlying message behind, how they want people to vote. Oh my God, I said that so weird. I'm sorry. I'm like, I'm running out of steam here. Try to not just focus on one thing at a time. Add two things that work together and analyze it in combination with each other, in conjunction with each other. Overlooks the need for clear expression. Factors that may have impeded communication include poor vocabulary choices, including the misapplication of vocabulary. Very common one, don't use words that you don't understand. Yes, you might want to sound smart. You think that advanced vocabulary might get you more marks, but if you don't understand or you don't have a full mastery of the words you're using, just don't use it. Obviously, you get rewarded for good vocabulary, but only in amounts that make sense, right? Or only in places that make sense. Use natural language, and if you want to use if you want to use more advanced vocabulary, just like get a few words that you're very confident of and use those. But don't go crazy because examiners can tell when you're out of depth and you're like just trying to throw fancy words in. Remember, you get marked well for readability. Is your piece easy to read and easy to understand, right? That's a big part of it. Does it structurally make sense? Is it straightforward and easy to read, right? As opposed to, do they sound like, I don't know, a 19th century poet, right? They're not obsessed with like crazy words. They want to see if you can analyze, and you can analyze without having a crazy vocabulary. Obviously though, if you want more vocab, go to LaunaTutors.com. I have a free vocabulary sheet that you can download, but even in the sheet it says just stick to a few of the words. Don't go crazy and like try to make everything upgraded. Struggles with grammar and incoherence. So struggles with grammar is just something you need to practice. I would recommend reading as practice because like basically all the books you download or borrow at a library or purchase, they have gone through a ton of editors. They have good grammar. And so by reading them, no matter what genre, whether it's like crime or romance or fantasy, they have good grammar. And so by reading it, you will naturally kind of like start taking in those grammar rules, right? And much as I spend time on TikTok, maybe avoid TikTok for a little bit. Like TikTok has really bad grammar, and I think that does impact your generation. So go back to reading, go back to the old ways. And incoherence is just not making sense. You got to have some structure. Make sure that like before you go into this, you have like a mini essay plan. You can write it here. Examiners actually have noted that they like seeing little essay plans written because it shows that you are thoughtful in how you progress, right? Let's say that you're writing and you're like, wait, I'm just writing and writing and I don't actually know what I'm saying. You need to pause instead of continuing writing because if you just write rambles, that's not going to fly with the examiners. They're going to read that and go, they don't know what they're talking about, right? So as soon as you feel like you're slipping off and like getting off track, you need to full stop, take one moment and get on track again. And usually I do that by pausing and then taking a look at my mini essay plan here and thinking, am I on track of this plan? Am I still following my essay plan or am I just rambling about something? If I'm rambling too much about something, I stop, I cross out whatever is excessive, and then I go on to my next point. But yeah, in section C, as in other sections of the exams, assessors looked to reward evidence of skill in analyzing and explaining the text elements and their interplay, and students approach these tasks in various ways that enabled success. There's not exactly just one strict way to do well in argument analysis, but I think avoiding those things and taking on the solutions that I've given you are going to give you a much better chance at scoring highly. Argument analysis ultimately was my favorite subject, favorite part of VCE English because it was quite structured. And once you kind of know how to do it, you can't ever really go wrong, right? It's like riding a bike. Once you learn how to do art, once you learn how to ride a bike, it can be like a year from now, and then you get on a bike and you're like, oh wait, no, I know how to ride a bike. But it can be a bit difficult breaking through the first mental barrier. You just need to remember argument analysis isn't about describing the analysis that's happening. It's about figuring out why the author does something and how this is meant to position the audience. And this doesn't just apply to, your exam, but it applies to watching advertisements, right? What is the advertisement ultimately trying to do? What is it? What is the contention? And then what is the purpose, right? The contention might be our perfume is the best perfume. And the purpose might be buy it now, as well as propaganda. Propaganda isn't always explicitly saying what it means, right? So, I think that argument analysis is also a good way to equip yourself politically, right? You engage with politics and propaganda with a bit more critical thinking. Why is the author saying it this way? What am I meant to feel when I'm reading this piece of political, I don't know, collateral or this piece of propaganda or whatever? Argument analysis is great, and these are just the things that you need to be wary of. So if you do any of these, note it down in your little notebook and then note down whatever my solution was, and you need to practice that before the VCE English exam. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that was really helpful for you. If you want any more tips and tricks for the VCE English exam, obviously follow my YouTube, give it a like and a comment if you want to comment a question. I also post a bunch of stuff on my TikTok. It's like more short form advice. And obviously check out all my free and paid resources. I have a lot of things. I have a vocabulary list, a language advice list, which I feel like those would be perfect for argument analysis. I have my argument study guide. I have a bunch of other text response study guides and just like random resources going on. But if you have time, please come to my VCE English exam preparation workshop. If you're watching this after the 28th of September, you can still purchase it. You can purchase the recording as well as the resources that come with it, and watch it in your own time. You can watch it as many times as you want. But yeah, thanks so much for watching this video today, and good luck for your exams.